Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
Hello and welcome to a look back at this week's Talking Heads. The latest on the ongoing pensions debate, a digital detox at an island school, the revelation you can't get a Manx pint at the Villa Marina, and John Haughton, MHK, comes under fire. With more, here's Stu Peters.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
But first, a debate is taking place in the House of Keys today. At this very moment, you can listen to it on our 1368 AM service, if you wanted to, over the growing cost of public sector pensions. East Douglas MHK Chris Robertshaw is asking ministers to explain how the gap between member contributions and the cost of paying staff pensions can ever be bridged. A set of reforms due to be debated in Tynwald last month was withdrawn at the last minute. Mr Robertshaw says without a proper solution, the impact on taxpayers and the island's public services could be serious. The government's financial strategy assumes increased income from economic growth will meet the pensions bill. What do you think about it? Do you think that the government's on the right track with this? I remember John Shimmins saying at a presentation about these plans a few weeks ago that it had taken decades to get into this situation, and it was going to take decades to get back out of it and get on top of it. Do you think that's a realistic view, or do you think we need a clearer roadmap? Are you happy that we're effectively putting part of our future growth to one side to pay for the public sector pensions deficit?
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
This is Talking Heads, and we're talking about the public pensions shortfall and how it's going to be addressed. Stu, I'm in the public sector pension scheme. I'll receive a pretty modest pension as it stands, as will 3/4 of the members, for 7.5% for 40 years. The problem is with the other quarter of highly paid civil servants who are commanding obscene payouts. This is a problem which needs addressing, says Paul. Well, yes and no. I can see your point and I can understand it, but, you know, the question surely is not the obscene pension payouts that they're getting, but the obscene salaries. But then we're told that if we want to have good quality people to command our important positions in the civil service, we've got to pay the going rate. And the going rate is what appears to many of us to be obscene salaries. But, you know, that's sort of the going rate for the job as I see it. So the pension runs alongside that, doesn't it, in many ways? If you've got a point of view about this, do get in touch. 66 13 68. And this from Dave. He says, what happens if future growth doesn't meet expectations or slows right down? Then we're in big trouble. This is an awful gamble. Very good point, Dave. And that's been my concern about this right from when it was first announced, that it is based on an expectation that the economy is going to grow by a worthwhile amount. I was talking to a pal who understands pensions and things and economies far better than I do. I'm fairly thick when it comes to numbers, who said that it's all very well talking about economic growth, but that doesn't necessarily translate into increased income for government. So, you know, we've got to be careful about that as well. You know, if the economy grows by 25%, that doesn't mean to say that the government's income is going to grow by 25%. So it's a difficult one, this, isn't it, when you think about it? And the other thing is, I mean, just sort of, you know, fireside economics. If I go to the bank and I say, right, Mr. Bank Manager, I'd like to buy a Ferrari. I've always wanted one. And I found a second-hand one that's £100,000. He would say to me, or she would say to me straight away, you don't have the income that justifies that. Yes, but I'm very hopeful that next year I will. They'd laugh me out of the place. Yet that seems to be the whole thing that this is predicated on, future growth in the economy, which there's no guarantee of that at all, is there? And the other thought is that it's the private sector that is going to generate growth in the economy more than anybody else. Is it fair that the private sector is doing all this work to grow the economy, but a good chunk of the benefit of that is going to the public sector? It's a bit of a pithy one, isn't it, really? Mr. Robertshaw is simply electioneering. He did a similar thing with the Irish Project, but later, once he became a minister, voted against having the Irish Project finances scrutinised by the Public Accounts Committee. I don't trust this MHK, says Chris W. Fair dues. OK, everybody's entitled to a point of view. Let's go to the lines and see what Alistair makes of this. Hello, Alistair.
Oh, hello, Stu.
Yeah.
Good morning. This pensions thing... What I think everyone has got to understand here is that the present system is not sustainable for this island.
No, it's not.
And basically, it's a very simple solution. And they've just got to bite the bullet. People have got to pay in more money to get less out.
Well, that's exactly what they're proposing, isn't it?
That's exactly what it has to be.
People are going to have to pay more in for longer and get less as a return. That's the government plan.
That's exactly what has to happen.
Yes.
And there's no need for debate and all this carry on at all. It just needs simple, straightforward formula.
But even with that, they're still reliant on growth in the economy to part fund the shortfall. So do you think that that's right? Or do you think that the amount that's paid in for a longer period needs to be greater so that it's effectively self-funding?
Well, I don't think that you can take the economy into the thing at all. I can't see why they're bringing GDP into this equation.
Right. They've
got to be able to run the pension fund irrespective of what happens to GDP.
Yes.
And if there's not enough money coming in, then you actually have to pay more money.
Yeah.
And you have to take less money out.
Yeah, and the other worry about it, I suppose, Alistair, is that, we all want to see the economy grow, but we would hope that everybody gets a lick of that spoon. So if the economy is successful, we all want to have a better quality of life, don't we?
Absolutely right. And I think it's a simple formula. It's pay in more and take out less.
The problem with it all is, and we've said this before on the programme, that an awful lot of people who are going to be affected by any changes are just ordinary working people. It's not all fat cat civil servants who've got, huge payouts planned. It's just ordinary working people. So morally, it's difficult, I think, to say to those people, you're not going to get anything like what we've said all these years you're going to be getting. So is it just a case of egg on the face of the politicians?
Well, I don't know what it is, to be honest, but I mean, you can't get away from the facts. And the facts are that this is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And there's many other things on the island that are not sustainable either.
Okay.
And I think that they have to look at this thing in great depth, but it's a simple equation.
Yes.
You put more in and you take less out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Alistair. I think that Alistair's echoing pretty much what the government's talking about doing anyway. It may be that they need to do more of it. Let's go to the lines. We've got our friend Howard on. Hello, Howard.
Hi, Stu.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about yourself there with the
leg warmers.
Leg warmers.
Yeah, the days have long gone that I had big hair, I'll tell you.
Just listen to Alistair there and say, well, he was talking a lot of sense in respect to the pensions.
Yes.
I worked for a company for a long time, and in the 1970s they introduced what they call, an unknown factor now, final salary pension, an excellent pension scheme.
Yeah.
But 10 years ago, they came in and they said it's unsustainable.
Yeah.
If everybody keeps taking out of the pot as is, there's going to be nothing in the next time they do an audit. So they were going to stop, and they did stop the final salary pension and went on to these non-defined.
Yes.
But what they did was we no longer contributed. The pension closed as far as we were concerned. It was retained, but they kept paying in just for a number of years to keep the pot balanced.
Yes.
And everybody understood that. And I'm afraid that's the way it's going to have to be for public sector pensions as well, because they are, although we term as superannuation, they are essentially a final salary because they're based on the salaries.
Yeah. Yeah, the big difference that I see, and I'm not an expert on pensions, I stand to be corrected, is that the difference between private pension schemes, like the one that you're talking about, and public pension schemes, is that the public scheme isn't funded as such. So the money that people are paying into the pensions now are going straight out of another door to pay the pensions of people who've retired, whereas a private pension scheme, every pound that you put into your pension and that your employer put into the pension went into a savings fund, effectively, that was then invested on the stock market. So you were sort of getting compounded interest over the period of the pension.
Mm-hmm. It's now what they call a zombie fund.
Right.
And it's managed by one of the huge conglomerates, Phoenix.
Yeah.
And I get paid out every month on from this company.
Yes.
But as Alistair said, people are going to have to bite the bullet, because if there's nothing in the bucket, there's nothing to come out.
My old dad used to always say, if you got no socks, you can't pull them up. And
and this is what's going to have to happen. Although the public sector unions are vehemently opposed to this, they're going to have to see the light, and they're going to have to come to their senses. Because you can't take out what's not going in.
No, but it's got to be done in a sensitive way, because it's not the fault of the people who are in the scheme that it's gone horribly wrong. I mean, to me, we need to be looking at all the actuaries and all the people who've been taking big sort of consultancy fees over the years.
You're quite right.
Yeah.
We had trustees, and they are still involved with the pension scheme, and they actually own the pension scheme as opposed to the government one.
Yes.
So the government is the owner of the pension scheme in that sense. So at the end of the day, they're going to have to sit down with everybody and talk to them in a sensible manner, although they won't have time to do it now. But there's something going to have to happen, otherwise the egg's going to crack and we're going to have an awful mess.
All right, fair dues. Some good points there. Thanks for your call, as ever, Howard. Stu, we need to scrap final salary pensions. I know a retired doctor earning £85,000 a year. We need to pay pensions on overall income, not final salary, where mates were given pay rises towards the end of their careers to improve their pot of cash. Give everyone the same. Too much money going to civil servants, says James. Yes, I think that was one of the proposals. There is a big document. I've not got it with me in the studio at the moment, and it's either available online. I don't know if it's tynwald.org or gov.im, or it might be worth a call to the Tynwald Library to find out how you can get hold of it. You might have to pay to buy a printed copy, I'm not sure. But one of the things that the government's looked at in this, and part of I don't know if they're proposing it, but certainly one of the things that they looked at was this thing about averaging salary rather than, so, the amount that you got at the end of your working career was based on an average salary rather than your final salary. Whether or not that's gone forward, I can't remember. I always thought that the state pension wasn't taxed. I have a pension from a government department which didn't go up this year. My state pension went up by £3 a week, and my tax has also gone up. When I contacted the income tax people, they said it was correct as my income had gone up. Okay. The thing about pensions is, especially pensions that you pay into rather than the state pension scheme, which, yes, I know you pay into, but occupational pension schemes, whether it's private or public sector, is that you get tax relief on the money that you pay into it. But the understanding is, and again, I'm not a pensions expert, I stand to be corrected on this, is that when you take the money out, you pay tax on it. So government says, oh yeah, but we give you these great tax breaks to have a pension. Well, yeah, they do on the money that you pay into it, but they get the tax at the end of the day. They always get the shilling out of the job, don't they? How come the very highly paid civil servants haven't worked out how to give us affordable government pension schemes? Asks Simon. Well, there's an element of cynicism that I note there, Simon. I can't understand why the state pension isn't paid on a sliding scale with regard to income and pay zero to anyone over 30,000. Approximately, to say that we all paid in is nonsense. Think of the things that we all pay in for and won't actually claim for. For example, single parents allowance, unemployed people in prison, the list goes on. Yeah, it's not easy, though. If you sit down and think about this, what do we do about this? It's very easy to come up with big headline sort of answers to this. Oh, well, just cut what everybody gets. But just think it through a couple of steps beyond that. So you cut the amount that people are going to receive. Like I say, if somebody's got some sort of a mortgage that they're expecting to pay off with the pension, what happens if that money isn't there then? And is it morally right to say to somebody over the course of a 30 or a 40-year working career, well, we know that you're skint at the moment because you're paying into this pension scheme, but when you retire, you're going to get this. And then say, well, actually, no, you're not going to get that at all. Now, people have said that's exactly what happened in the private sector, so I understand that. But morally, is it the right thing for government to be doing? If people have been paying in, where's it all gone? If they've spent it, surely that's theft, says Gary. Well, I think Chris Robertshaw said in that interview that we played earlier on, the fact is that it's a hand-to-mouth scheme, effectively, in that what people are paying in now is going straight out the other door to pay people who are receiving pensions. $38,000 a year for the head of Stop Smoking. Unbelievable. Snouts in the trough, says Steve. OK. It's OK, the government's saying all this now about pensions. If they hadn't borrowed money from the pension fund at the rate they did, surely the fund wouldn't be in such a mess as it is now. I think that's a different fund, though. They have to take responsibility for that at least. And yes, I agree. More in, less out. That's how you run a good business, in my opinion. That's from a retired business owner.
Stu Peters. Yes, the nation station, Manx Radio.
This is Talking Heads on Manx Radio. Thanks very much for sharing a part of your afternoon with us. This hour on the programme, pupils, staff and parents at King William's College have given up technology today as part of a digital detox. From 8:30 this morning, everyone at the college has been without their mobile phones, tablets, laptops, email, Facebook and Twitter in an attempt to encourage social interaction. Lasting 24 hours, the initiative hopes to highlight our reliance on gadgets and explore the impact that has. Could you do without your mobile phone, particularly in your computer maybe? Get in touch and tell us on 66 13 68. That's just what Vivian's done. Hello, Vivian.
Hello, Stu.
So are you somebody who's constantly wedded to your mobile phone?
No. I'm of the generation where I think they can be useful, but also they can be a menace.
I'm with you on that.
They have taken away the art of conversation.
Yeah.
Computers have taken away the art of writing a letter, and I think it's awful. But, I mean, I have a mobile phone. I do use it in an emergency, but it's got to be an emergency. But I just think these young people and young parents tripping around a shop with a phone stuck to their ear...
Yeah.
I think it's terrible.
Or worse than that, you know, they're going around the shops and they're looking down at the phone and not looking where they're going or anything.
Yes, exactly.
And then they get to the checkout and they pay, and you know, while the girls were running the stuff through the till, they're busy on the phone. It's just, I think it's rude.
I do too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I might be old-fashioned, and I accept that, but I'm sorry. And then they wonder why their telephone bills are so expensive.
I'm with you entirely on this, Viv, I think, because one of my daughters said to me a while ago, "Oh, Dad, you've still got a landline. How quaint." I said, "Well, yeah, what do you mean quaint? Of course I've got a landline." "Well, why don't you just use your mobile phone for everything? You know, and you can probably get a broadband package that doesn't involve having a landline and stuff. It's very old-fashioned having a landline." And I've realised that nobody uses landlines even nowadays. Everybody uses the mobile phone. I mean, when these things first came out, it was a lot more expensive to use a mobile phone than it was to use a landline, wasn't it?
Well, I'm on a landline now, but I have a mobile phone. I have an iPad, which I accept emails on, but I don't use for anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not against the technology. I think I'd find it very difficult to go without for 24 hours, but I do think that people take it too far.
I do too.
Yeah, good.
But I say congratulations to King William's College.
Yeah.
I think they're doing a good job.
Always welcome. Thank you very much for calling us today, Vivian. If you've got a point of view on this, could you do with the digital detox, if I could say it? The worry that I've got about this is that if there is ever a third world war, it won't be sort of bombs to try and hurt people or anything. All they need, the bad guys, is one of these nukes that will do an electromagnetic pulse somewhere up in the atmosphere. It'll take out all the satellites, so there'll be no communications. It'll take out everything that's got a microchip in it. It'll just fry it, effectively. And the world will stop moving. I mean, if we didn't have phones, we couldn't use cars because they've all got chips in them nowadays. Most of the things in your home have got microchips in them. You know, civilization would be completely over, wouldn't it? You wouldn't need to have an army. You just detonate one of those things up in the sky somewhere and do no physical harm to anybody, but it'd just stop the world from moving. A couple of texts in. I've just returned from a visit to Belgium, spent a lunchtime in a park where many groups of teenagers had arrived on normal bikes, not racing around like angry wasps. They sat quietly in their groups eating lunch and clearing up their rubbish and talking quietly. How lovely. No one was shouting or swearing. Not one of them had a mobile device. Real interaction and a delight to see. Often notice that Euro youth behave like this, so where have we gone wrong, asks Sue. I don't know, Sue. It surprises me. I would have thought that this was a worldwide phenomenon. The young people particularly are just married to the mobile phones. But I'll take your word for it. So Belgium's the place to be if you want to get rid of a bit of tech. I've recently returned from 2 months on a cargo ship, says Stuart. No phones, sea line or mobile. No internet. Heaven. Yeah, I would imagine that if you've got that as a good excuse, I'm sorry, I'm completely incommunicado, can't talk to you, don't bother sending me an email, can't reply, can't even get it, then that's okay. The presumption is that everybody's contactable 24/7 these days. And I know that that's a problem with employers and employees, that some employers expect their staff to be available at the end of the phone 24/7. It's not fair. People have got to have time off. Stu, don't you find it ironic that to force people into talking to each other, you need to take away their phones, a device that was invented to allow people to talk to each other? Good point. That's from Pete. Yeah, if you've got a point of view on this or not, get in touch, 66 13 68. Like I said to Vivian, I still sort of use I use it only for making phone calls in emergencies. I don't tend to use it very much because I'm still convinced that it's a lot more expensive. Although I think that the majority of people these days are on these sort of packages where you get 1 billion minutes and 1 million texts free, but you've got to pay them £50 a month or something like that. I think my average mobile phone bill is about £12 a month. And I get rollover minutes on that as well, so it certainly never goes up. But I know people that spend, 50, 60, 70 pounds a month on the mobile phone, which I just find completely ridiculous. But there you go. Are you up to date with all this technology? Do you use it a lot? I've got friends who do, just absolutely constantly on the mobiles. The faces are never out of the phones. I'm amazed that they can see what's going on around them. Are you like that, or are you a bit more like me? Do you only use it really when you really need to? I remember watching one of those space programs. Which one was it? Star Trek. When I was a kid, and do you remember that they used to have like the equivalent of a little flip phone? Was it called a communicator in it? I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, wouldn't that be cool? And when mobile phones eventually came out, well after that, they were the size of a car battery. And certainly in the UK, there were only two networks. You were either on Cellnet or you were on Vodafone, I seem to remember. You had to cart this huge thing around with you. I could never afford one because they were hideously expensive, but I used to use a lighting designer fella, Dave Robinson, who used to turn up with this thing, and it was just amazing. I was so impressed that he had a mobile phone. He could phone from anywhere. And then, of course, they got smaller and people started to use them for texting and all the rest of it. And now, I mean, there's more computing power in the average mobile phone than it took to land men on the moon. So they are incredible devices, but I do worry that it's making us an entire society that's completely dependent on the tech. Another comment, this is from Derek. He says, you're absolutely correct about satellites. Oh, this is my worry about an electromagnetic pulse being the end of the world. And was the reason that Morse code on ships was continued. It's now gone, but the threat remains. Yeah, it does. Everything's got a microchip in it these days. Your fridge has probably got a microchip in it. So if there was one of these electromagnetic pulses up in the atmosphere somewhere, it would just turn everything off. Cars, everything. Stu, kids shouldn't be allowed mobile phones in school, full stop, says Ian. I don't know what the rules are in schools. I don't know whether or not they're allowed to carry them into classrooms or not, or if they've got to sort of check them in at the gate. I don't know what the rules are. But if they are allowed to carry them around all day, then you're right, they shouldn't be. Stu, maybe we should build more lampposts so that when people are looking down, they'll walk into the lamppost. But if I couldn't use my mobile, I couldn't get in touch with you, Stu. Fact. That's from Davey. Thank you, Davey. How can people get in touch if they're not using the phones, etc., says David H. Well, there is a circular argument, I suppose, there in some ways. You wouldn't have much of a show if people were not using the mobile, says a different David. Yes, all right, hoist by my own petard, I suppose. Stephen King book, Cell, all about people being sent a signal over their phones which sends them mad and the world goes crazy. Sign of the future. Oh, scary thought. Stu, only when it's necessary, and believe it or not, the world doesn't stop spinning with not being joined at the hip to my mobile phone, says Jen. Good for you. Stu, one of my friends years ago had a boat called On Business. His secretary told anybody looking for him that he was out on business. Perfect. I love the idea of that. I'm pretty useless with my mobile. I mean, quite often I'll get somebody who'll just turn up and I'll say, I wasn't expecting to say, I sent you a text yesterday afternoon. Quite often I get home and my phone will be in my jacket pocket or whatever, and I'll just leave it there. And then when I go to bed, often in the early hours of the morning, I'll think, I need my phone because I've got an alarm set on it for in the morning. I get it, and all sorts of missed messages and missed texts from people and things like that. Yeah, I'm pretty useless, I've got to say. This from Johnny says, do you ever stop and think how mad everything has gone in your lifetime? I do. I think I must have been alive for 1,000 years sometimes, says John. I do sometimes think that I'm living and that we're living through the most interesting times in terms of developments. I mean, you know, if you were born in the 1700s, 1800s, nothing much changed for entire generations. Nowadays, the pace of change is absolutely astounding. If you think about things like, what was it, 50 or 60 years from the Wright brothers first leaving the ground in the Wright Flyer to Kittiwake to the first man on the moon. I mean, it's incredible, the pace of development in our lifetime. So I do sometimes think that. But yeah, there are certain things, especially as I get older, where I think, no, the world's gone mad.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
First, though, Economic Development Minister Lawrence Skelly has promised a review into food and drink sold at government outlets after it emerged the island's biggest entertainment venue doesn't stock Manx ale. In the House of Keys this week, it was revealed that you can't buy a locally produced pint at the government-run Villa Marina. The issue came to the fore during a debate on the substantial benefit supporting local firms has on the Manx economy. Tell us what you think about this. Call 66 13 68, text 166 177, or email talk@manxradio.com. We're talking about Manx produce and whether or not Manx ales should be sold at the Villa Marina. Apparently they're not. And I can understand that maybe there's an argument about draft beers. Maybe they don't keep as well for some reason or whatever, or I don't know. Something about casks and kegs. Don't fully understand that. But you'd have thought that there could be a bottled alternative. So quite why this is, I don't know. Isn't this just another example of don't do as I do as I say, asks David H. Well, it could be. Hey boy, it's not just the... Oh, this is from Frank. Hobby horse. It's not just the Villa Marina that doesn't stock Manx ales. The world-famous Ramsey Commissioner's drinks cabinet is stocked to the brim at the ratepayer's expense, yet not a bottle of Manx ale in sight. Facts, says Frank. How do you know, Frank? Have you been in there? Have you seen this drinks cabinet? And from what you've told me in the past, it's full of expensive champagne anyway, so a bottle of Bushes or Oakles in there just would look out of place, wouldn't it? What else? Farmers get massive payouts from the taxpayer but export their animals. Yeah, some of them do, I suppose, but... well, I suppose there are two ways that you can look at that. Should farmer subsidies only be on Manx produce that's sold in the Isle of Man? Or is it to keep the farms viable and keep employment going and keep production going in the Isle of Man, so that if anything ever went wrong with the boats or whatever, we could produce enough food for the local population? I don't know what the answer is to that, to be honest. I suppose there are two ways of approaching it. This from Pauline, I think. Interesting report on local beer not being stocked at the Villa. Ironically, we received an email from our daughter, who live in Tennessee this morning. They're currently on a cruise, and as you can see, there's a picture. One of the ports they visited, they were tickled pink to find Bush's beer being sold at the top of the Rock of Gibraltar, yet we can't find it at the Villa Marina. Cheers. Yes, quite. If you've got a point of view on this, do get in touch. 66 13 68. Do you try and buy locally wherever you can? Does it matter to you, really? Or is it just one of those things that the government's constantly talking about, but apparently not constantly doing? Let's go to the lines because we've got Nigel on from Andreas. Hello, Nigel.
Hello there.
Yes.
Well, the point is the Gaiety also doesn't sell Manx beer.
Oh.
And the Gaiety doesn't have draft beer, but we have 3 of our 4 breweries who bottle beer.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't sell Manx beer.
No, you're absolutely right, yeah. Yeah.
It would be better if Mr. Scully said he didn't know why, and he would go and find out from all Manx outlets that are controlled by the government, rather than saying it's possibly an issue with draft beer, because it's not.
All right, so
it's an issue with beer.
I'm guessing that the Villa doesn't do bottled Manx beer either. Is that the case, do you think?
I don't know.
Don't know for sure.
The Villa. But certainly the Gaiety doesn't.
Right, OK, interesting. Thank you very much for your call, Nigel. If you've got a point of view on this. I'm just researching at the moment, thanks to Google, the difference between cask ale. Cask ale, known as cask conditioned beer or real ale. Brewers of cask ale don't interfere with it, they don't filter it, and don't pasteurise it. All they do is put fresh live beer straight into the barrel where, still in unfinished form, containing lots of lovely fruity residual yeast, it remains alive and kicking until it lands in your glass. I've got to scroll through about 19 pages of the benefits of cask ale before I can tell you about keg beer. More comments from you. This is from Michael at the Welbeck, so he'll know about this. The brewery, Heron and Brewery, production system for keg beer broke down following many years of struggling with problems, half the produce being unusable. Then they didn't replace it. They tried sending the beer away to be packaged, but obviously that was very expensive. The cask ale can only be used for 3 to 4 days after being tapped. Therefore, somewhere like the Villa, where they don't have regular usage, would waste gallons of the stuff. However, some of the other breweries do produce bright beer, so it may not be impossible to use local beer there. And that's from Michael. Well, that's kind of what Lawrence Skelly was saying, wasn't it, about sort of keeping it and the fact that it's probably not being sold every day. You might go a week between, so if it only keeps for 3 or 4 days, you can see why maybe that's not an option. And I can see that Michael's also sent me a link to what bright beer is. So, and I'm sure that I'm wrong on this, but my understanding of this then is that cask ale is traditionally produced beer, where sort of fresh beer is put into barrels. Keg beer is stuff that's been filtered, and it requires carbon dioxide and stuff like that to give it a bit of fizz when it is pulled through the pumps and stuff. And bright beers are where the yeast is dropped out of the beer while it's in the barrel, either by the use of finings or whatever, or other sort of pressure-induced phenomena to make sure that it stays fresh. But what it does suggest to me, and I think I probably realise this, is that it's that there's an awful lot of art and skill involved in producing a good pint of draft beer, whichever method you use. But I mean, certainly the older methods do require careful. I mean, it was always the case that people, you go down to the so-and-so, the landlord there, he really looks after his beer. And I thought, well, what's to look after? You get a barrel and you put a tap in it and you pull it and sell it to people. What's difficult about that? But apparently the way that you handle the beer is really, really important. So that's a 3.5-minute guide to beer. More of your comments on this. This is a no-brainer, of course. There should be Manx ale served. There's a genuine issue with serving cask ale where it's not being constantly served, but surely bottled ale is a solution. Bottled ale isn't as good as cask, but it's at least consistent, longer life and quicker to serve in an interval. As a real ale drinker, I'm quite selective of where I drink ale because so much depends on how well it's kept. There you go, you see. If I can't have cask, then I prefer bottled to keg beer any day. Another one, we have Costa Starbucks, but why don't we have Matco, which is brewed locally? Is there a reason? Matco, what is that, a beer or a coffee? I don't know. Talking about Manx supplies, last week new EU rules came into force on mobile roaming charges. The rule also applied to non-full members, i.e. Iceland, Sweden, etc. The island's not a full member but benefits from the EU through Britain's membership. So why have our telecom providers not complied with the new laws? Iceland and Sweden have. Right, OK, I don't know is the answer to that. Beer. All this talk about Manxness makes me laugh. The Manx beer probably only has one ingredient that's possibly Manx in it, and that's the water. And that falls from the sky anyway, and probably made by, by people who aren't Manx. You can't get much Manx produce over here. In a certain company, Manx soup mix, usually there's only one Manx ingredient, spring cabbage, everything else is imported. Right, so are we paying lip service to shopping local produce? If you've got a point of view on it, share it with us. Get in touch. You know how to do that. We're reflecting on the fact, as was revealed in the House Keys this week, that there is no Manx beer served at the Villa Marina, it seems. And so a bit embarrassing, I would have thought, for Lawrence Skelly and his colleagues in the department. But what do you think about it? Apparently the reason is because it can't keep. The system that they use there, it won't keep. And as we just heard from Michael at the Welbeck, 3 to 4 days is the sort of period that you need to sell fresh beer in. So you can maybe see that there is a reason behind it. Oh no, Stu, no Manx beer at the Villa. We're doomed. I say doomed, says Dave. Well, it's probably not the most important story of the year, but I think it is indicative of some of this non-joined-up thinking that we get from government at times. They say that they want joined-up thinking, and they are very keen at preaching to us about what we should be doing, but then they're not doing it themselves. So I think it's an interesting story. Government departments buy nearly everything off Ireland. It needs sorting, says Neil. Yeah, again, that's a double-edged sword, really, because if you force people to buy local, then local suppliers tend to get a bit greedy and the prices go up, and sometimes the competition is needed to keep the prices reasonable. And I appreciate that off-island suppliers have often got economies of scale where they can, it costs them less to make the things that we want to buy anyway. So it's a complex question, really. Hey, boy, you forgot to mention the bottles of gin, brandy, vodka, martini, and the obscenely expensive Glavar whiskey. Hick, says Frank. Ramsey Commissioners, yeah. Gaiety sells bottles of hooded ram, says Michael. Right, okay, well, there you go. There was an accusation that the Gaiety didn't sell Manx bottled beer. They do, apparently, hooded ram. There was a consultation on farm subsidies last year when an appeal was made by some farmers for taxpayers to press for some of the subsidies to be only paid on animals that went to our local meat plants. So that was an opportunity for taxpayers to make the change. How many took that opportunity? Okay. Stu, I suggest that we all retire to the pub for some intensive beer research. You're around, Stu, given all the money that you get accused of earning. If only it was real. Best regards and putting my coat on as I type. I'll see you there, Mark, yeah. Manx whiskey is no longer produced now, is it not? Manx Spirit. Don't know why, but I know of at least 2 German companies who wanted to import it in bulk. Despite past inquiries, no contact was achieved. That's sad. Stu, love the show. Don't usually save the funny. Usually save the funny stuff till Friday, but I must be going mad. Didn't only the other day Lawrence Skelly say government did give favour to Manx companies in the procurement bidding process? I might be wrong. Surely that's anti-competitive and therefore illegal. Some clever lawyer will be rubbing their hands after that one. But it's to know Screaming Lord Such is still alive and living under another name in the Isle of Man. Thank God we can have Bushy's tent up at TT, or have they changed their minds about that one? That from Bill. Let's go to line 1. We've got Ernie waiting to talk to us. Hello, Ernie.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Well, I think I'm all right. Yes, all this talk about beer is giving me a bit of a thirst, but...
Yes. I've been to 1 or 2 receptions at Douglas Town Hall, right in centre of Douglas, where they very kindly give you a drink from a bar that they set up in the council chamber.
Oh, yes.
Right? Oh, yeah. And I just sort of said, I'm in Douglas. Can I have a bottle of Douglas beer, please? And the barman said, well, their suppliers won't supply them with bottled beer from any brewery in Douglas.
Why not? Did he say why?
He just said we can't get it.
Can't get it?
So I offered it. I suggested they went up to ShopRite and bought some. But it's very, very sad that our local council will not support our local industry.
Well, yeah, I'd need to know more about that. I mean, I went out to buy something a few weeks ago, and I went into the shop and I said, have you got one of these? And he says, no. He says, no call for them. It's not worth stocking them. You're the 3rd or 4th customer I've turned away this week.
Yeah. In fact, the only beer they had at the bar at the Douglas Council was from a brewery which says they're probably the best brewery in the world.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, so that's not even UK beer then.
Not even UK, so I find it very, very sad that Douglas Council will not support industries within the borough of Douglas.
All right, fair point, Ernie. Thank you very much for calling. Like I say, there are sometimes valid reasons for these things, and if anybody knows a valid reason why this is the case, then don't be shy, get in touch with us. 66 13 68. Andrew says there's no excuse not to stock Manx beer at the Villa Marina, as both Oakles and Bushes can supply a keg version of their bitter. Can they? Right, okay. Although Camera would prefer them to sell cask ale wherever possible. It is possible for outlets that only open occasionally to sell cask beer. You just need to make a bit more effort to get the ordering and the storage and dispense correct. And Andrew is Camera Brewery liaison officer, so he ought to know about it. Good. I think we're getting closer and closer to a solution here, folks.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Hi, Stu, you run a coffee shop and you don't know if Matco's a beer or a coffee, says Pete. No, I don't, genuinely. The only Matco I know is a company that makes car mats and carpet sets. So, no, I don't know. You can't get true Manx kippers anymore because our boats aren't allowed to catch herring. Herring is imported from the Atlantic. Right. I'm going to create Manx Beer. I'm going to create Manx Beer Limited. The taxpayer will fund the installation of the Manx Beer network to pipe beer into every property on the island. The beer will be 3 times the cost of bottled beer, and Manx Beer Limited will set tariffs and a standing charge of around £400 a year before you even drink any beer. Oh, I think that's post of the month, that. I like that, yeah. Good. I wish you'd put your name to it, because I think that's a cracker. You won't get reduced roaming charges for mobile phones because we've got the OFT, says Steve. Okay. Yes, I have to admit, sadly, that apart from the lovely Manx knobs we sell, everything else is imported. This is from Nick at the Sweet Shop in Castletown. The Manx don't really make sweets, unfortunately, so shopping local with me is just supporting a local family, 2 of whom were born on the island. Sad but true. Okay, thank you, Nick. Bushy's brew beer with Manx malt and have a Manx brewer, says Derek. Good, because somebody said that there was nothing Manx about it. Stu, surely they could get beer delivered on Friday and buy just enough to sell over the weekend. Stock control tills should be a good guide. Yes and no. That's a bit fundamentally flawed, because either you'll not have enough beer and you'll be turning people away, or you'll buy too much and you'll end up throwing it away. So I appreciate what you're saying, but you're either going to underperform or you're going to end up with a lot of wastage if you're not very careful. Hi again. Bushies, whenever possible, use malt produced from locally grown barley. That from Andrew from Camera, so good, okay. I'm sure that the man down the pub has all the answers, says David H. Yes, he does. Not usually the right answers, but he's got all the answers. Great suggestion here from John. He says, Stu, idea. You should start off each show with a problem like this and make it your aim to have it solved by the end of the hour. Today, local beer at the Villa. Tomorrow, public sector pension deficits. Be great, says John. Well, I'm game. Just be aware, though, that I might get some things right. Almost definitely I'll get some things wrong as well. So it's not necessarily a panacea for all our ills.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
You're listening to Talking Heads on Manx Radio. I'm Stu Peters. On the programme today, we're looking at the new Laxey Bridge, which is now under construction. Engineers are confident it will be ready for TT. And we'll also hear about a study that suggests many young people are avoiding sunscreen so that they can get a better tan. First, though, North Douglas MHK John Haughton has spoken out after a report investigating his conduct found him to have acted in an aggressive and threatening manner after he became involved in a staff dispute in the Clerk of Tynwald's office. The Parliamentary Committee report will now go before Tynwald later this month. Speaking to James Davis on this morning's Mandate programme, Mr Haughton insists he's done nothing wrong. Where do you stand on this? Let's go to the lines. On line 1, we've got Sally in Douglas, who I think has probably got an idea about it. Hello, Sally.
Hi.
John Haughton, is he your MHK?
He is my MHK, yes, but I've had personal dealings with him over the last 30 years within work situation and personal, and John has always been for the underdog. He's not an establishment man, and he will always challenge, yes. And don't forget, he was a special policeman for 23 years,
yes,
and he stepped down for that. He's very principled. And it's a pity that the MHKs aren't as committed as he is, because he will always get back to you, no matter how big or small, and he will tell you if you're in the right or if you're in the wrong.
Oh, well, that's good.
He's certainly not a yes man.
Yeah.
And I just say, I'm just sorry that I think this has all come about. It's because they're just trying to get John to toe the line, to be sheep, and just keep your mouth shut.
Oh, you reckon?
I definitely reckon, yes.
Okay.
They've been after him for a while, so I'm sure this is a little bit run up to the elections.
Oh, right, okay.
I definitely think it's a bit of muck spreading.
Right, fair dues. All right, thank you very much for your call, Sally. It's nice to talk to you. If you've got a personal view on this, don't be shy. Share it with us like Sally did. 66 13 68, especially if you've had personal dealings with John Haughton. Hey, boy, I agree with Mr Haughton, says Graham. They don't like hearing the truth. When I read the Manx Indian newspaper front page headline about him, I thought, good on him, it sounds like me. Okay. Mr Haughton's always come over as a bit of a panto villain. I personally have never been able to take him seriously, and this latest performance only confirms my opinion of him. Get on the Gaiety stage, Mr Haughton. That from Alan. There you go. So there are two different parts of the spectrum of opinion on John Haughton, MHK. What's your point of view on this? Share it with us. 66 13 68. Let's have a quick chat. 166 177 if you'd rather send a text, or email us to talk@manxradio.com.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
This is Talking Heads, and this part of the programme we're talking about North Douglas MHK John Haughton, 400-page report, and he's been invited to apologise to the people that he's upset, and it's all going to be talked about, I think, in Tynwald. What do we think about this? One of our contributors says that he's a pantomime villain. Another caller has said that he's a great MHK and he'll look after people big and small. So what's your point of view on this? Now, I try not to read these very long emails, but this one I think is probably relevant, from Chris M. He says, Stu, I have the following to say in relation to this matter, which may be a bit controversial. Good. I read with interest the article in the Manx Independent concerning the disciplinary plight of John Haughton MHK. Having recently been through a disciplinary process myself with my former employers, I can relate to Mr. Haughton's sentiments when he's attributed as describing his own proceedings as a kangaroo court. From the outset, I've never considered myself above the law or any employment disciplinary code. However, what I expect in return for honouring this stance is that should I become a defendant in any related matter, I'd be subject to a fair and impartial hearing. I believe it's a fundamental right that dates back to the Magna Carta that a defendant can question his accusers. Well, certainly in criminal court you can, can't you, or civil court. Moreover, it's in more recent times we've enshrined in modern legislation human rights, Article 6, the right to a fair trial, and I quote, you have the right to a fair and public hearing within a reasonable period of time. This applies to both criminal charges against you or in determining cases concerning your civil rights and obligations. Hearings must be by an independent and impartial tribunal established by law. It's possible to exclude the public from a hearing, but not the judgment, if that is necessary to protect things like national security or public order. If it's a criminal charge, you're presumed innocent until proven guilty according to law and have certain guaranteed rights to defend yourself. So that's what the legislation says. I consider this legislation a foundation stone and should be applied fairly to every form of legal proceedings, from major criminal cases to employment disciplinary brought about under the provision of the Employment Act. In my own case, written statements, and I use that word loosely, were presented in evidence against me, which were not even signed by their alleged makers. In one case, a document purported to be made by a former colleague was in fact the handwriting of his manager, which again was unsigned. Like Mr. Haughton, I was not allowed to call witnesses, nor did the employers want the witnesses to be called either. I wonder why. I'd also like to see the burden of proof altered in these matters from the balance of probabilities to that of the criminal court standard of beyond all reasonable doubt. With the former, the hearing just has to accept a 49 to 51% to prove the case, whereas the latter standard speaks for itself. Best regards from Chris M. Interesting. Very interesting, that. I don't know what... obviously, I don't know what the situation is, but I think John Haughton said that he was being got at in this and that it was payback time for previous spats, maybe. I was involved in a thing, probably 30 years ago, maybe longer. I used to be involved in a hospital radio station, and I and a couple of people were getting a bit disaffected by the direction that the thing was going, and we were fairly vocal about it, and the management committee managed to construct a case against us to get us all fired from a voluntary organisation, which was very strange at the time, but it was a case of, I mean, they used something completely different because they didn't like what we were saying. Now, do you think that might be the case here or not? Get in touch and tell us. 66 13 68. Let's go to the lines because we've got Sue on who's got a point of view on this. Hello, Sue.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
Yes, I think it's nice to see somebody like John Haughton that will actually go and do something and challenge these people. But like the general public, when they go and challenge these people, he's getting the same response of, being picked on and... you'll do it my way or shut up, basically.
Ah, right. So you think that the establishment's ganging up on him?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Oh, right, okay.
That's what they seem to do.
Right, okay.
In fact, I will be in touch with John Haughton to although he's not my MHK, to see if he can actually help with... what's going on down my end, basically, because it's all completely disgraceful and completely wrong.
All right, fair dues. So that's Sue. She thinks he's a good fella. And now here's somebody you ought to know about this. Let's go to line 2. We've got Dominic Delaney on. Hello, Dominic.
Good afternoon to you, Stuart.
Good afternoon. It's been a while since we spoke.
I've got to take up your time, but this is an important matter.
It is.
And the interesting part about this is I'm aware, obviously, because I used very much the staff of the government office to do my job for 30-odd years.
Yes.
And I know this lady concerned in this matter was an excellent secretary. But I would like to know is why her evidence seems to have been ignored. Why isn't she the leading light in this as far as the evidence is concerned? Because it was her that was getting harassed, as I understand it, and the complaint was made about. And I also think you should, by the way, if you're going to read this report, so we can have a trial by radio, read out the members of the committee, so the public can understand who are the judges at this stage in this case.
So again, do you think it's the establishment ganging up on John?
I know the establishment, Stuart.
Yeah.
I know how it works. First priority for a member of Tynwald is not to be out working for the establishment. It's there to be working for the people. And I'm horrified to think that these people can actually get another member publicly at this stage without him being tried in Tynwald court, if that's what they want to do.
Yes.
Because the public now don't know the facts of this case. I don't know all the facts. But I know one thing. I know the young lady concerned. I know what an excellent person she was and how she helped me to do my job.
Right, okay. Well, you were always a fairly outspoken politician, so you must have had a few brushes with the establishment.
Obviously,
in this sort of way.
I've had brushes like everybody else has, and I know the secret is to be fair to not only the public. When I was made even a minister, I told my staff, my job wasn't to run the department, that was the staff job.
Yeah.
My job was to make sure it was run for the benefit of the people.
Yes.
And I think that's been lost. A lot of politicians seem to get elected and think somebody transplants a brain in their head and they're able to run departments. They're not. They're not capable. I mean, you've only got to listen to some of the answers of the members. One person admitted he didn't read a contract. He signed on behalf of us.
Yeah.
Over you, me, and everybody else in the gas situation. I mean, this nonsense. We had another minister come on after he left the job and said he didn't want to interfere. Why the hell was he sent there in the first place? That's his job, is to look after the public and make sure the departments are run for their benefit, not for the benefit of the establishment. And while I'm on, by the way, Stuart, I'm sorry to take up your time.
No.
Could I ask you had the minister on Friday, the chief minister.
Yeah.
What concerns me and the people of this island is what is plan B if Europe has its way and closes down not only our businesses but our low tax situation. Anyone who knows Manx history knows it's only survived by being different than the rest of the islands around us.
Yeah.
If they want to make us the same as Europe, we're finished.
Yeah, all right.
Somebody should ask the chief minister and his mates what is going on.
What the plan B is.
Them prancing around on the poop deck and jigging in the rigging, the Manx ship estate is in a hell of a mess. And somebody needs to find out where we're really sailing to.
I miss you from Manx politics, Dominic. Will you not stand again, please?
I can't. Listen, I've had my day, but I'm not prepared to see an injustice, particularly somebody who was trying to, as I understand reading it and what I can see of it, is that trying to protect the member of staff who are working for the members. See, what people don't understand, and you must tell them this, is that the staff of the clerk's office are not civil servants per se. They are working for the members of the House of Keys and Tynwald, and therefore they're working for the public, and they have a different situation than just civil servants.
Gotcha.
And I cannot understand why this isn't explained to the public before we start judging John Haughton.
All right.
He makes mistakes, like we all made mistakes, but don't judge him on some sort of report from a kangaroo court. Let's find out exactly why they didn't, for example, consider the evidence of the member of staff.
Well, maybe that's going to come out when it's debated in Tynwald, I don't know.
Well, that's why I'm saying don't judge him now.
Yeah. All right, fair dues. Dominic Delaney, lovely to hear from you again, and don't leave it so long next time. Line 3, and we've got Peter Murcott on. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Stu. Now, I haven't read anything at all about the issues. I've not read anything about this report. I only know what was broadcast on Manx Radio, but I wouldn't comment anyway just with regard to those other issues. But I will just say about John Haughton. I know him fairly well, and I've always found him to be outstandingly helpful. I've brought one or two issues to the whole of the Keys. John Haughton actually isn't my member, but he's put himself out to be very helpful, and he has actually been able to forward one or two things that I've brought to the Keys. Now, not everybody responds. In fact, I get very few responses when I write to all the members, which I do from time to time.
Well, isn't it, though, Peter, that he just agrees with your point of view on certain things?
No,
so therefore he would be helpful.
No, I mean, it doesn't. The fact is that he goes out. I've noticed he's gone out of his way to be helpful. He's gone the extra mile.
Good.
And I've noticed that he's the same with other people as well.
Okay.
And I'm not surprised that folk have rung in and said this, because my impression is that it is not just myself personally that he's been helpful to, because I'm not particularly an election-winning cause, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Okay.
Some of the issues that I take up. And that, in fact, that again is what impresses me.
Yeah. Okay.
Because some of the issues that I bring up, I don't think they're necessarily vote catchers.
Right, yeah, that's an important point.
He's been willing to help, and I certainly want to put on record my gratitude for the way in which he's responded, and that's really the sum total I'd like to say.
All right, it's good to hear from you, Peter. Thank you very much for your call today. If you've got a point of view on this, and it seems that we're getting lots of very positive calls about John Haughton. A couple are having a bit of a pop at him, but I think the majority of calls are fairly supportive. If you've got a point of view either way, get in touch with us. You know how to do that.
Manx Radio.
This is Talking Heads, and we're talking about John Haughton, MHK for North Douglas. And what's your view on John Haughton? Good guy or goodbye? And we've got a very full mailbox on this one, lots of callers, which is great. So it's always nice that we can have debates on things like this. Hey boy, there's only one tune to play at the end of part one. Woolly Bully. Fact, says Frank. Thank you, Frank. Afternoon stew, seems to me that we need more Mr. Haughton's in government. Stand your ground, fella. I'm behind you. That from Gary in Ramsey. Sorry, I've got a bit of a croaky throat today. Stu, I don't know anything about the case in question, but I have it on good authority that he's a bully. Just watch now that all the previous unclaimed offences will come out of the woodwork. As they say, what goes around comes around. John Haughton is like Guy Fawkes. He's the only honest man to enter Parliament, says Diane. A bit near the knuckle, Diane. Infamy. They've all got it infamy, says Jeff M. Stu, this is a direct result of populist voting. A majority of existing MHKs have little intelligence and therefore no idea of sensible debate. Question time resembles day release at Broadmoor. Let's hope for some academically qualified and balanced MHKs to be successful at the general election in September. Regards from Neil. John Haughton's a bully. Good, let's hope the next batch of MHKs are the same. Oh, the trouble with the majority of government workers is that they're namby-pambied. You only have to look at them the wrong way, and they're off for 6 months with stress. If more of our so-called leaders were like him, then maybe our island would be in better shape, says Mal. Stu, I agree with your first call. The dictator bill tells MHKs what to do and say. If somebody steps out of line, they all gang up on them for speaking their own mind. This government, in my opinion, is corrupt to the core, says Ian. John Haughton, a bully. You must be joking. John goes the extra mile. My wife was very ill in Walton Hospital. He rang me all the time asking about her welfare. He also arrived at Walton to visit her with a beautiful bunch of flowers. An unexpected surprise visit. It was most appreciated. He also dealt with getting my wife flown home to the island back to Nobles from Liverpool. Yes, John is a man who does what it says on the tin. A good man, says Charlie. Tail's been wagging the dog in Manx politics for too long, says somebody else. Stu, why can't Haughton get on with being an MHK and stop getting into stupid squabbles like a naughty kid? Get on, Mr. Haughton, and do what you're paid to do, being an MHK, says Peter. I thank you. Keep your thoughts coming in.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Let's go to the lines. We've got John on in Onken. Hello, John.
Hi, good guy.
Good guy.
A few years ago, or many years ago now, my wife had a high-profile job with a captive insurance company on the island, and she was very highly qualified. Unfortunately, the captive insurance company pulled out of the island, so she had no alternative to do something else. She got a job in government and started out all right, but then the bullying, for some reason, the boss took a dislike to her, bullied her until she couldn't face going to work. She got in touch with an MHK who, to put it bluntly, didn't want to know. So it does go on. She walked out of the job in the end, and fortunately she got another job in government. He gave her a bad reference, which was the first time she'd had one in her life. But fortunately, where she went for the next job, they saw through it when she explained what had happened, so she got another good job in government.
Right.
So it does go on, this bullying.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And this lady, whoever she is very lucky that she found an MHK who was prepared to stick his neck out, because most of them don't want to know.
All right, fair comment. Thank you very much for calling, John. Just out of interest, I don't know if it was Dominic Delaney who said we need to know who were the members of the committee. It was Chris Roberts-Shaw, David Quirk and Howard Quayle, apparently. So Chris Roberts-Shaw, David Quirk and Howard Quayle. So only one member of Comyn in there, interestingly. John Haughton for Chief Minister, says Phil. Yeah, I got a similar comment from Nick, I think it was, but Nick made all sorts of allegations about other members of Keys and was talking about corruption and naming names. And we can't do that, Nick. You ought to know the rules of the programme. You can't do that unless you're prepared to stand up in court and defend what you've said. And Pat has sent a similar one, which is a little bit near the knuckle in terms of naming people for misdeeds. John Haughton's a man of the people, very black and white. Whether he agrees with you or not, he'll fight for you if he thinks that you're right and tell you if he thinks that you're wrong, says Paul. Well, you can't ask for much more than that from somebody, can you? Stu, I know nothing other than what was broadcast on the radio, so difficult to provide an informed opinion. That aside, the voters should remember. I know nothing other than what was so difficult to provide an informed opinion. That aside, the voters should remember who introduced the so-called toilet tax, blamed Treasury for losing his pension paperwork, and the band played Believe It If You Like. So he was not forthcoming on that. It's a bit broken up, this. Blaming others for lack of transparency. It comes as no surprise that John Haughton is again adopting a defiant stance. It's what he seems to do. He's not my MHK, and I'm chuffed about that. Not a man I care to believe and struggle to take seriously. But isn't that a qualification when you become an MHK? I hope the voters see through you, John Haughton, says Jan. OK. Well, like I say, I think the consensus generally amongst our contributors today is that people think he's a good man doing a good job. But there are others who don't. So he seems to be a bit Marmite, really, doesn't he?
Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.